Some ghosts refused to stay buried. John Mitchell, known by his code name The Reaper, the deadliest sniper in U.S. military history with a kill count still classified, vanished without a trace, leaving his daughter, Aaliyah, to believe he was dead. His lethal precision made him both America's most dangerous weapon and its greatest liability. Then Logan Hastings made his fatal miscalculation. A scholarship girl, a powerful family, and a corrupt system designed to crush anyone who dared to challenge it. But they couldn't see the military precision hidden in every piece of evidence she gathered, the tactical awareness in her quiet resistance, and the warrior blood flowing through her veins. Now, as the corrupt forces of Westfield begin to crumble and the powerful families scramble for cover, the truth finally emerges. Aaliyah Mitchell was never fighting alone against impossible odds. She was awakening a force even the government feared to face. The yellow bus slowly came to a stop in front of Westfield Academy. Aaliyah Mitchell stepped off, her heart pounding in her chest. Her old sneakers hit the glossy marble floor, reflecting her worried but determined face. Westfield Academy was known throughout the region as the most prestigious school, reserved only for the children of wealthy and powerful families. The grand buildings, designed in classic English architecture, were covered in lush ivy, creating a perfect, aristocratic beauty. But behind that beauty lay invisible barriers and deep prejudices, protected by a powerful system of wealth and influence. Aaliyah walked through, under the curious, judgmental, and scrutinizing gazes of the other students. As the only black girl in the elite group of students, she immediately became the center of attention, like a misplaced entity in a world that wasn't hers. Keeping her composure, Aaliyah gently clutched the silver pendant of her late grandmother, the one she always said would help her get through any hardship. Aaliyah's grandmother, a strong woman who had fought against racial discrimination in the South, had always taught her, "You are stronger than anyone who tries to bring you down." With that thought in mind, she walked straight toward the main hall, but each of her steps seemed to echo uncomfortably in the vast space. The other students, in neat uniforms and shiny shoes, gathered in groups, looking at her with pity and suspicion. Trying to ignore their stares, Aaliyah made her way to the principal's office to complete her enrollment. Principal James Calloway, a middle-aged man with a stern, cold expression, looked her up and down before reluctantly offering his hand. "Welcome to Westfield," he said, his tone completely devoid of warmth. "Ms. Mitchell, I hope you adapt quickly to our high standards." She smiled politely, her voice full of resolve. "Thank you, sir. I will do my best." As she stepped out of the principal's office, she accidentally bumped into a group of students standing just outside the door. A mocking male voice broke the silence. "So, this is the scholarship girl the school had to bring in?" Aaliyah looked up and met the gaze of a tall teenage boy with golden hair and icy blue eyes full of arrogance. That was Logan Hastings, the son of Mayor Thomas Hastings, the most powerful man in town. He stood there as if the world was at his feet, sneering in a mix of disdain and amusement. Logan continued, his voice dripping with intentional sarcasm. "I didn't know this school had a charity project now." His group of friends burst into laughter, the sound cutting into Aaliyah's self-esteem. But she didn't respond. Instead, she lifted her head gently, her deep brown eyes locking with Logan's cold, challenging gaze, a silence more powerful than any retort. Aaliyah walked past them, leaving behind an abrupt, sudden silence. For a moment, Logan frowned, irritated that she hadn't given him what he expected. Weakness, fear. Instead, he received a strong and proud gaze, something that baffled him inexplicably. Aaliyah's first day at Westfield had only just begun, but an invisible battle had already begun. She understood that to survive here, she would have to be even stronger, more resilient, and ready to face challenges far greater than she had ever imagined. Because deep down, she knew one thing. Westfield wasn't just a school. It was a battlefield where she had to fight to protect her dignity, her future, and herself. The classroom door closed behind her as she sat at her desk, her gaze resolute, ready to face whatever awaited her. As the classroom door closed behind Aaliyah down the hall, Logan Hastings stood leaning against the cold wall, his sharp blue eyes still fixed on the silhouette of the girl who had just entered the classroom. In Logan's mind, what had just occurred was not merely the arrival of a new student. It was a direct challenge to the inviolable power he had always prided himself on. Born and raised in the most powerful family in town, Logan Hastings had grown accustomed to being treated specially. His father, Thomas Hastings, was a man with absolute power, not only holding the long-term position of mayor, but also controlling much of the local economy through the lucrative contracts and a vast network of connections. For Logan, the family reputation wasn't just a point of pride, it was a weapon, one that he used to assert his dominance at Westfield Academy. From an early age, Logan had learned how the world worked. The strong are the ones who rule the game. He knew his place, understood that everyone feared the Hastings family, and he used that fear with a ruthless and calculated approach. At Westfield, no one had ever dared to challenge Logan until Aaliyah Mitchell appeared and dared to look him straight in the eye with a gaze full of determination. It was that gaze, the proud, powerful silence, that stirred something cold within Logan, like a smoldering fire, waiting for the opportunity to erupt. "Who does that girl think she is?" Logan sneered, his voice dripping with contempt just loud enough for his close friends to hear. "She's here on a scholarship, but acts like she owns the place." Beside him, Brock Chambers, the son of the biggest real estate mogul in town, laughed loudly in agreement. "She really thinks she's on the same level as us, Logan. Maybe we should help her realize where she truly belongs." Logan smiled, but it was a cold, calculated grin. "Don't worry, I'll make sure she learns that soon enough." Later that afternoon, in the school cafeteria, Aaliyah sat in a quiet corner, eating the modest lunch she had brought from home. Before long, she noticed the unusual silence around her. Logan walked in, flanked by Brock and two other friends, Ethan Klein, the son of the local judge, and Trey Warren, the son of the town's police chief. Together, they created an overwhelming wall of power. Logan placed his hand on the edge of her table, his gaze stopping on Aaliyah's simple lunchbox. "Why don't you try the beef Wellington on today's menu? Oh, wait, I forgot. Maybe you can't afford it." Short bursts of laughter followed his mocking words. Aaliyah looked up, her eyes silent but full of strength and defiance. Logan suddenly realized that, once again, he had failed to break her with his words. Frustrated by her unnerving calmness, Logan suddenly swiped his hand across Aaliyah's lunchbox, sending it crashing to the floor, the food spilling everywhere. The cafeteria fell silent, all eyes now on Aaliyah. "You might want to learn some manners when you're allowed to be here, Mitchell," Logan said softly, just loud enough to be heard, his voice full of challenge. "Remember this lesson." The group turned and walked away, leaving Aaliyah alone in the silence, surrounded by pitying stares from other students. She bent down to pick up the scattered food, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, but not a single tear fell. Instead, a spark of anger ignited in her heart. Aaliyah swore she would never let Logan win. Meanwhile, at the far end of the cafeteria, a small girl with light brown hair approached. Zoe Wilson, the daughter of the school janitor, bent down to help her pick up the food. "Don't mind them," Zoe said quietly. her eyes full of sympathy. Logan thinks he can do whatever he wants just because he's a Hastings. Aaliyah took a deep breath, grateful as she looked at her new friend. I'm not afraid of him. Zoe gave her a soft, encouraging smile. That's exactly why he'll never leave you alone. From across the cafeteria, Logan Hastings watched the exchange between the two girls with dark, icy eyes. In Logan's mind, Aaliyah Mitchell wasn't just another student. She was a threat that needed to be eliminated. And Logan had decided he would use all the power and influence he had to make sure this new girl understood where she belonged, that this was his school, his territory, a place where no one dared defy the name Hastings. And so, a devious plan began to form in Logan's mind, a campaign of sophisticated bullying, one filled with power and influence, an invisible battle where honor and dignity would be violently challenged. But there was one thing Logan Hastings could not foresee. Behind this seemingly weak scholarship girl lay a great secret, a ghost from the past that was ready to awaken whenever her father's daughter was in danger. Logan's sophisticated bullying plan wasted no time. By the very next morning, it began silently and mercilessly. As the sun rose behind the towering buildings of Westfield Academy, the crowded hallway fell into an eerie silence. No one dared speak when Aaliyah Mitchell's locker appeared, adorned with offensive words painted in bright red, like blood dripping down the metal door. Aaliyah stood frozen before her locker, the humiliation swallowing her whole. Around her, indifferent glances flickered, quickly looking away, and even teachers passing by pretended not to see. No one helped her, no one protected her, because everyone understood that messing with Aaliyah was a direct challenge to the Hastings family. At the far end of the hall, Logan Hastings quietly observed Aaliyah's reaction, his face expressionless, his cold eyes satisfied. Logan had grown accustomed to winning through silence and power, used to achieving what he wanted without ever getting his hands dirty. This was just the first step in a well-laid plan he had designed to crush the girl who dared oppose him. But Aaliyah, though hurt, did not cry. She slowly opened her locker, pulling out the few books that hadn't been destroyed. Beside her, Zoe Wilson stood watching with helpless eyes. You have to report this to the principal, Aaliyah. You can't just let this slide, Zoe whispered. Aaliyah smiled bitterly. Do you think they'll do anything? Zoe lowered her head, knowing Aaliyah was right. And that harsh truth was quickly confirmed when Aaliyah went to Principal Calloway's office. In response to her complaint, she was met with indifferent, dismissive words and flimsy excuses as if they had been pre-programmed. Miss Mitchell, perhaps it was just a harmless prank from the students. Please don't make a big deal out of it. As soon as Aaliyah left the office, Principal Calloway immediately called Mayor Hastings, his voice trembling with a tone of flattery. Mr. Hastings, I've handled it as per your instructions. Please rest assured. No one on the school board dared interfere with what Logan had set in motion. They all understood that Westfield Academy was no longer just a school. It was a symbol, a stronghold where the power of the Hastings family was deeply rooted. In the days that followed, Logan's bullying escalated dramatically. Aaliyah found herself repeatedly facing subtle but humiliating acts of violence. Her textbooks were torn apart, filled with mocking insults. During gym class, her sports uniform was taken, forcing her to endure the prying and mocking eyes of her classmates as she wore something inappropriate. Each of these small actions had been carefully calculated by Logan, ensuring that he would never be directly linked to them. The climax of the bullying came on a Friday afternoon during advanced chemistry class. As Aaliyah was about to finish the experiment she had been working on all week, Logan suddenly shoved into her, knocking a bottle of corrosive chemicals onto her entire experiment. Aaliyah panicked, watching her hard work vanish in an instant. Mrs. Harrington, the teacher, clearly saw what had happened but merely sighed, shaking her head gently. "Miss Mitchell, you need to be more careful. I'm afraid I can't give you credit for this assignment." Her words struck Aaliyah's last remaining hope for justice and fairness at Westfield. She looked at Logan, her eyes filled with anger and bitterness, but he only responded with a cold, indifferent smile, the kind that sent a chill down her spine. After class, Zoe quietly walked beside her friend, heartbroken, whispering, "Aaliyah, this might just be the beginning. Logan won't stop until you give in." But Aaliyah shook her head firmly, her voice resolute. "I will never bow to him. Even if I have to fight the entire school, I won't give up." That evening, when Logan returned to his family's vast mansion, Mayor Thomas Hastings was already waiting in his office, his presence commanding, powerful, and cold. He looked at Logan slowly. "You're doing well, but be more careful. Westfield is my political future, and our family's reputation cannot be affected." Logan sat down opposite his father, his eyes as cold as the man before him. "Don't worry, Dad. I know what I'm doing. No one will dare stand by that girl. The power is still in our hands." Mayor Hastings smiled, pleased, his gaze full of calculation and coldness. He knew his son would succeed, and he knew Westfield would remain under the absolute control of the Hastings family. However, neither Logan nor his father knew that. Across town, in her small room, Aaliyah was gripping the silver pendant of her late grandmother, her eyes alight with fierce determination. She didn't know how to fight like Logan, but she had courage and integrity, and she knew, no matter what, she would never surrender. For deep within Aaliyah's childhood memories, there was a vague but powerful figure, a mysterious man her mother always avoided mentioning, a father she had never truly understood, but one who would soon become the key to changing the entire course of the battle. In the small room, the dim light from the old desk lamp cast a shadow over Aaliyah's tense face as she silently listened to the sound of her mother's footsteps returning home. But today, those footsteps weren't as steady and calm as usual. They were shaky and heavy, as if trying to hide a profound collapse. The door opened gently, and Monica Mitchell walked in, her expression distant, still wearing her crumpled nurse's blouse, not even bothering to take it off. Aaliyah quickly stood up, her face filled with concern as she looked at her mother. "Mom, what's wrong? Something happened, didn't it?" Monica stared at her daughter for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Then she sat down on the small chair, her shoulders slumping with exhaustion. "The hospital just called. They told me I don't need to come in anymore. They said it was due to budget cuts. But you know, this is the pressure from the Hastings family." Aaliyah felt her heart constrict. Logan and his father had taken their cruelty beyond the school, infiltrating her small family. She knelt beside her mother, her voice trembling but resolute. "Mom, don't worry. We'll find a way. You've always taught me to be strong, right?" Monica gently took Aaliyah's hand, trying to smile, but tears began to spill helplessly from her eyes. "I'm sorry, sweetie. I wish your father were still here." At those words, Monica suddenly fell silent, her face changing as though she had unintentionally touched a long-buried memory. Aaliyah was taken aback by her mother's strange reaction. "Mom," she spoke softly, "why do you always avoid talking about Dad? Who is he really, and why won't you tell me the truth about him?" Monica took a deep breath, her gaze drifting far away. "Aaliyah, I've only been trying to protect you. There are truths that are better left unknown. But this time, Aaliyah was determined not to let go so easily. She spoke gently but firmly. "I've had enough, Mom. Please tell me the truth. Who is my father?" Monica hesitated for a long time, but eventually she stood up and opened a small cabinet where she kept the most important mementos. From it, she pulled out a yellowed envelope and placed it, trembling, into Aaliyah's hands. "Read this, and you'll understand. But I warn you, there are some doors once opened, they can never be closed." Aaliyah's heart raced as she slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a faded photo and an official letter from the U.S. Department of Defense. In the photo was a young man with a rugged face, piercing eyes that seemed full of cold intensity, dressed in a perfectly tailored military uniform. Aaliyah's hands shook as she realized this was her father, the man she had never known. She hurriedly read the letter inside. "Dear Mrs. Monica Mitchell, we regret to inform you that your husband, Sergeant John Mitchell, has been confirmed as missing in action during a classified mission." Sergeant Mitchell was an exceptional member of the Special Forces, with contributions we cannot publicly disclose. He was widely known in the military under the code name The Reaper, the most skilled and feared sniper in U.S. military history. We deeply regret this loss and will forever value his extraordinary contributions. The details of the mission and the reason for his disappearance remain classified and cannot be disclosed. We ask that you keep this information confidential to ensure the safety of you and your family. Sincerely, U.S. Department of Defense. Aaliyah froze. Her hands trembled as her mind spun from the earth-shattering secrets that had just been revealed. Her father was not the ordinary man who had abandoned them as she had always thought. He was a living legend, one of the most famous snipers, feared by the underground world, known as the Reaper. The fragmented memories now pieced together, and Aaliyah understood why her mother had always avoided questions about her father. But deep inside, a bigger question echoed, urging her forward. Was her father truly missing, or was he out there somewhere, still alive? "Mom," Aaliyah spoke, her voice full of conviction. "Is Dad still alive? If he's out there, he could help us." Monica shook her head sorrowfully. "I don't know, sweetheart. But I'm afraid that looking for him could bring great danger to us." Aaliyah stared deeply into her mother's eyes, her voice unwavering. "We're at the end of our rope, Mom. People like the Hastings family won't stop. If Dad is the man they talk about in that letter, then he could help us. At least, I need to know who my father truly is." Monica looked up at her daughter, seeing the strong resolve in her eyes. In that moment, she realized just how much Aaliyah had grown, much stronger than she had ever imagined. Once again, Monica tightened her grip on her daughter's hand, speaking softly but seriously. "If you've made up your mind, I won't stop you. But remember, sweetie, the man you're looking for, your father, he's not just a legend. He's a ghost, someone who once instilled terror, and not everyone is ready to face him." Aaliyah took the photo of her father, her eyes filled with determination as she gazed deeply into his cold, stern face. Now she understood clearly. This fight wasn't just personal anymore. To reclaim justice and honor, she needed to awaken a legend that had been lying dormant for far too long, a man whose very name could make enemies tremble. That night, after her mother had fallen deeply asleep in exhaustion and unease, Aaliyah remained sitting at her desk, her eyes fixed intently on the photo of the man in uniform, the father she had never met. Under the dim yellow light, his face seemed strangely alive, as if those cold, piercing eyes were looking directly at her, penetrating her soul with the power of a legend. On the desk, her old laptop displayed the search results Aaliyah had just run. Though information about the Reaper had been nearly wiped clean from public records, with a little patience and some luck, she had pieced together small fragments to form a picture of her father. The small text on the screen sent a chill down her spine. John Mitchell, codename the Reaper, was a member of the Green Beret Special Forces. He was regarded as the most skilled and deadly sniper in U.S. military history. The missions he undertook were highly classified, with most details never publicly released. Notably, Mitchell was famous for his ability to approach and retreat from targets mysteriously, vanishing without a trace like a ghost. That's why he was given the codename the Reaper, meaning death. Aaliyah sighed, a mix of pride and fear swelling within her as she learned the truth about her father. He was not the ordinary man she had imagined as a child, not the kind of man who had abandoned them. He was a living legend, a haunting ghost who had spread fear across battlefields. She suddenly remembered her mother's words. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. At this moment, Aaliyah understood those words more than ever. Across town, in his luxurious office, Thomas Hastings sat quietly before his computer screen. The latest reports from his subordinates displeased him. It seemed that Monica Mitchell and her daughter had yet to bow down and submit. But he assured himself that this would not go any further. Mayor Hastings picked up the phone, his voice cold and firm. Make them understand that going against us is a serious mistake. But don't make it too obvious. It needs to be subtle, yet strong enough to make them fear us. A brief confirmation came from the other end of the line. Hastings leaned back in his chair, satisfied as he looked out the window, confident that no one in this town could withstand his power once he set his sights on them. Meanwhile, at the Mitchell home, Aaliyah was still deep in her search. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a short video posted on a secret military forum, titled, "The Secret Triumph of the Reaper." She clicked on the video. The screen displayed shaky footage, accompanied by the faint but clear sound of a soldier's voice recounting. I once saw Mitchell take out a group of insurgents in the blink of an eye. He moved like a shadow, almost invisible in the darkness. We called him the Reaper, because when Mitchell appeared, the enemy was already dead before they even knew what hit them. But the scariest part wasn't his extraordinary marksmanship. It was how he appeared and disappeared, without a trace, without a sound. The video ended, and Aaliyah's heart raced. She looked at her father's face in the photo, his eyes now bearing an inexplicable coldness. She silently wondered whether the man who had once terrified the world was still alive, and if he was out there, would he be ready to step forward and protect her? Just then, the phone rang, interrupting Aaliyah's thoughts. The screen displayed an unfamiliar number. Hesitating for a moment, she answered, her voice cautious. Who is this? A deep, powerful voice responded on the other end, filled with both allure and mystery. Aaliyah Mitchell, is it? Yes, it's me. I'm someone who fought alongside your father on the battlefield. If you've uncovered the truth about him, I think it's time for us to meet. Aaliyah's heart almost stopped in surprise. You know my father. Is he still alive? There was a brief silence on the other end before the voice answered cryptically. Some answers can't be given over the phone. If you truly want to know, meet me tomorrow at the cafe near the school at 4 p.m. Don't speak about this to anyone. The Hastings family has eyes and ears everywhere. The call ended abruptly, leaving Aaliyah stunned. She stared at the phone, her mind spinning with a flood of questions. Outside, the night had fallen cold. Meanwhile, in the Hastings mansion, Logan sat comfortably. His eyes as cold and sharp as an eagle's. He was confident that everything was under control. But what he didn't know was that at this very moment, Aaliyah's mysterious past was awakening, and a true legend was about to return. The following afternoon, just as Aaliyah was leaving class, she suddenly felt the atmosphere around her grow strange and heavy. Whispers and furtive glances echoed down the hallway, creating an invisible pressure surrounding her. Her instincts told her that something terrible was about to happen. Before she could even react, Logan Hastings appeared, blocking her path with a cold, mocking smile. Surrounding him were Brock, Ethan, and Trey, all wearing faces of malicious enjoyment. "Hello, scholarship girl," Logan spoke, his voice dripping with provocation. "I hear you're looking into things you shouldn't. You don't seem to understand the consequences of going against the Hastings family." Before Aaliyah could respond, Ethan and Trey grabbed her by the arms. Before she could scream, Logan yanked her bag from her grasp and threw it forcefully to the floor. The hallway fell into a chilling silence, all eyes on the scene, yet no one dared to intervene. "Let's see what this poor girl's bag holds," Logan announced loudly, opening her bag and tossing everything onto the floor. Textbooks, notebooks, and even the precious photo of her father, all scattered on the ground. Aaliyah screamed in despair, "Stop! You have no right to do this." But Logan only responded with a cold, ruthless laugh. He tore the photo of her father right in front of her, the pieces of paper falling to the ground like her heart breaking apart. "How pathetic, Mitchell," Logan whispered close to her ear, his voice like a knife cutting through. "Your father abandoned you, and now you have no one to protect you here." She struggled, but Ethan and Trey held her too tightly. Logan continued, his eyes gleaming with cruelty. "From now on, you'd better remember your place. Don't try to dig into things you have no business knowing." He nodded sharply, and Ethan and Trey released her, causing her to collapse to the floor. The other students quietly walked away, none daring to meet her eyes. That evening, Monica Mitchell was determined to speak up at the school board meeting. She entered the room, her small frame filled with the strength of a determined mother. Monica laid out the events clearly, recounting the cruel actions that Logan and his friends had inflicted on her daughter. However, as soon as Monica finished speaking, Principal Calloway immediately stood up, his eyes full of disdain and challenge. "Mrs. Mitchell, we've investigated, and unfortunately there's no evidence to support your claims. Perhaps your daughter is just causing trouble for attention." The others on the school board nodded in agreement, their gazes cold as they sided with the power of the Hastings family. Monica stood up in anger, her voice trembling but resolute. "You can't deny your responsibility. You all know what's happening, but you're choosing to turn a blind eye out of fear of power. This is a school, not a private playground for the Hastings family." But her courageous words were immediately cut off by a cold voice from the door. "Mrs. Mitchell, you're making very serious accusations." All eyes immediately turned to the door. Mayor Thomas Hastings stood there, his presence commanding, his cold, sharp gaze cutting through the room. He stepped forward, slowly, each step more imposing than the last. "Do you really think that the words of a mere laborer like you can stand against my family's honor?" He looked at Monica with eyes as cold as ice, his voice sharp, slicing through her dignity. "Or do you want to lose something else besides your job at the hospital?" Monica choked on her words, feeling the humiliation and helplessness rise in her throat. She looked around the room, hoping to find some support, but all the people present lowered their heads in silence, none daring to meet her gaze. In the end, Monica understood that all her efforts to speak out were futile against the overwhelming power of the Hastings family. She silently left the meeting room, her eyes filled with tears, but she wouldn't allow herself to cry in front of them. In their small room, Aaliyah sat curled up on her bed, her face pale with pain and anger. When her mother returned, she didn't say a word, just gently hugged her tightly, as though trying to shield and protect her from the harsh world outside. Aaliyah spoke through her trembling voice. "Mom, maybe we've reached the breaking point. If Dad is alive, we need to find him. I believe he'll help us." Monica remained silent for a long time before speaking, her voice filled with despair, but also with a faint glimmer of hope. "I know, but sweetheart, your father is not an ordinary man. If we call him back, we don't know what will happen next." Aaliyah looked up at her mother, her eyes bright and resolute. "Mom, no matter what, I won't back down anymore. It's time for the Hastings family to understand they can't bully us forever." She grasped the silver necklace from her grandmother, clutching it tightly in her hand, feeling the strength and determination surge fiercely in her heart. Aaliyah knew that she had surpassed her own limits of endurance, but now she no longer feared. She had made up her mind. It was time to awaken a force far more terrifying than the power of the Hastings family. The atmosphere in the small room became suffocating as night fell. The weak light from the desk lamp flickered over Aaliyah's exhausted and tense face. In her hand, the phone trembled slightly, the screen displaying chilling threat messages from an unfamiliar number. "If you and your mother want to live in peace, it's best you know your place and leave this town immediately." Aaliyah exhaled sharply, her heart feeling as though it might stop. She knew exactly who was behind these threats: Logan Hastings and his father. The Hastings family never stopped until they got what they wanted. And this time, they had truly crossed the line of her endurance. As Aaliyah was still processing the shock, Monica entered the room, her face full of concern. Upon seeing the phone in Aaliyah's hand, she immediately understood what had just happened. "Aaliyah, are they threatening you again?" Monica's voice trembled, full of helplessness. Aaliyah looked deep into her mother's eyes, no longer able to lie. "Mom, they're not stopping. This time they said they'll hurt us for real if we don't leave." Monica gripped her daughter's hand tightly, her voice choked but trying to sound strong. "I'll do anything to protect you. But what can we do when the whole town is afraid of the Hastings family?" In that moment, Aaliyah's gaze accidentally landed on her father's old file on the desk. A daring thought flashed in her mind, filled with both risk and hope. Aaliyah reached for the file, flipping through the yellowed pages, and found a small phone number noted at the bottom, with a short, handwritten note beneath it. "Only call in case of extreme emergency." Aaliyah looked up at her mother, her eyes full of determination. "Mom, maybe this is the time Dad wanted us to call this number. He told you that, didn't he?" Monica's face briefly showed fear when she saw the familiar number, her voice shaking with hesitation. "But if you call, I'm afraid we'll never return to a peaceful life again. That man is not an ordinary person. Mom, our peaceful life was destroyed long ago. We have no other choice." Aaliyah spoke gently but firmly. Without waiting for her mother to object further, she quickly dialed the number into the phone. Her heart raced, each ring sounding like a small bomb exploding in her chest. After a few seconds of tense waiting, a click came from the other end, followed by heavy silence. A cold, deep, and sharp voice spoke. "Who's calling this number?" Aaliyah felt her breath catch in her throat, but she forced herself to speak clearly. "Father, it's me, Aaliyah Mitchell." There was a long silence on the other end, only the faint sound of breathing, as though the man was carefully considering something. Finally he spoke, his voice still cold but softening slightly when he recognized her. Aaliyah. What's happening that you're calling me? Mom and I are in danger. The Hastings family, the mayor, Thomas Hastings, and his son, they're threatening us and want to hurt us. We don't know what to do anymore, Dad. Another short but heavy silence followed. Then the man's voice came back, firm but concise. Are you sure about this? Aaliyah didn't hesitate for a second. Yes, Dad. We have no way out now. The man took a deep breath, his voice now colder and more decisive, just like a legendary Special Forces operative preparing for battle. Stay calm and listen to me. Tomorrow, I'll be there. Until I arrive, don't trust anyone except your mother. Act like everything is normal, but always stay alert. I'll handle this. Aaliyah felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety swell in her chest, her eyes fighting back tears of emotion. Dad, you're really alive. You can help us, can't you? There was a brief silence on the other end before the man's cold but commanding voice came through clearly. Aaliyah, remember this. I will do whatever is necessary to protect you and your mother. No one is allowed to harm our family. I will come and put an end to this. The call ended abruptly, leaving a strange strength in Aaliyah's heart. Monica, though anxious, also felt a glimmer of real hope, her eyes filled with both fear and trust as she looked at her daughter. Sweetheart, I just hope we've made the right decision. Aaliyah squeezed her mother's hand, her eyes now filled with a new sense of hope. I believe in Dad, Mom. No matter who he is or what he's done, he's still my father, and right now we need him more than ever. On the other side of town, in the vast Hastings estate, Logan sat relaxed on the sofa, a phone in hand and a smug smile on his face. He had no idea that at the very moment he thought he had everything under control, a mysterious man was on his way back, ready to undo everything the Hastings family had built. The next morning, the sky over Westfield was a cold gray, as if forewarning that something was about to happen. Aaliyah arrived at school, maintaining as calm an exterior as she could, but inside, her emotions were in turmoil after the fateful phone call with her mysterious father. None of the students noticed the change in her gaze. But just a few steps away, Logan Hastings kept his eyes on her, a self-satisfied look on his face, like a hunter watching his favorite prey. Looks like she's finally learned her lesson, Logan said quietly to Brock as they stood near the classroom hallway. Brock chuckled, his eyes full of contempt. She better have, or she'll find out what real suffering feels like. Logan smiled coldly, full of confidence. But what he didn't know this time was that a shadow had quietly returned to town, observing from a hidden corner, recording his every move. A shadow he couldn't even imagine. The Reaper had returned. John Mitchell stood silently beneath the shadow of an old tree, his tall, solid figure unchanged from the days when he was a feared sniper. His cold eyes carefully watched Logan's every move, like a hunter patiently waiting for the perfect moment to deliver the final blow. No one saw him appear. That was the most terrifying part. The man known as the Reaper was a legend for his ability to disappear and appear like a ghost, leaving no trace. One thing was certain: when the Reaper appeared, the enemy would never know peace. In the following days, his mysterious presence began to exert invisible pressure on the Hastings family's tightly knit network of power. First came photographs and confidential files about Thomas Hastings' corruption and wrongdoings, suddenly appearing on the desks of town council members and local journalists. Cases that had seemingly been forgotten were suddenly revived, causing a stir among the public. But it didn't stop there. Mysterious incidents began happening around Logan and his friends. One morning, Logan discovered his prized car had been broken into, with dozens of photos inside, clearly documenting the violent actions he had taken against Aaliyah. Ethan and Trey were horrified to find their social media accounts had been hacked, exposing mocking and threatening posts they had written, quickly damaging their family's reputation. Logan began to feel uneasy. He couldn't understand what was happening. From a man who was absolutely confident, Logan was slowly becoming paranoid and extremely tense. His once secure world was now shaking, thrown into chaos by an unseen enemy he couldn't grasp. Meanwhile, Mayor Hastings also began to feel the crushing pressure from public opinion. His closest allies suddenly became cautious, avoiding him, no longer fully trusting him as they had before. Even some key figures in the town council publicly expressed doubts about his leadership and ethics, something that no one would have dared to suggest before. In his private office, Thomas Hastings slammed his hand on the desk, his face now filled with anxiety and rage. "What is this? Who dares do this to me? It can't be a little girl or her mother." His loyal assistant bowed his head, trembling as he responded, "Sir Hastings, there are reports saying John Mitchell, known as the Reaper, has returned to town." Hastings' face turned pale for a moment. He had never imagined that name would come up again. He knew all about the legend of the Reaper from his youth, when Mitchell had stirred up the entire military world with his classified missions. For a man like that to show up in this small town, it was like a nightmare becoming reality. At the same time, in a small cafe near the school, John Mitchell sat quietly across from an old friend, Marcus Reed, a former U.S. Army intelligence officer. Reed studied him carefully, finally speaking. "What are you planning to do next, John?" The Hastings family isn't easily defeated. John Mitchell took a sip of his coffee, his gaze as cold as steel, his voice low and decisive. "I've spent my life fighting those who think they can stand above the law. The Hastings family will pay for this, but first, I want them to know what fear feels like, just like what they did to my daughter and Monica." Marcus Reed shuddered slightly upon hearing that cold voice. He knew his old friend well enough to understand that once Mitchell made up his mind, nothing could stop him. Life in the small town of Westfield began to change dramatically. Public opinion shifted, and those who had once feared the Hastings family slowly began to find their courage. People started to believe that, finally, someone had stepped up to face the underground force that had controlled the town for so long. And in that small room, where Aaliyah sat beside her mother, she suddenly felt an unfamiliar warmth and confidence swell in her heart. Though she had yet to meet her father, she knew he was out there. Quiet, determined, and ready to do whatever it took to protect his family. That man was no longer just a distant legend. He had returned, ready to face down those who had caused his daughter and the woman he loved the most to suffer. Because when the Reaper returned, everyone knew that justice would be served, cold and decisive. In the days that followed, Westfield was no longer the peaceful town that Logan Hastings once thought he controlled. Secrets that had been buried for so long began to surface under the invisible hand of an enigmatic man, quietly dismantling the pieces of his family's power, John Mitchell, the man known as the Reaper. Starting with the smallest things, the Reaper used his exceptional intelligence skills to slowly uncover the secrets that Mayor Thomas Hastings had long believed would remain hidden forever. First, secret financial reports about the mayor's shady dealings mysteriously appeared in the inboxes of every town council member. Each bribe and illicit transaction was clearly recorded, coldly and thoroughly documented with undeniable proof. Soon after, these confidential documents were sent to local journalists. A media storm exploded, forcing Thomas Hastings to scramble to extinguish the fires spreading everywhere. But the more he tried to cover it up, the deeper he sank into the perfect trap that the Reaper had laid for him. A sense of losing control began to creep in. Thomas Hastings erupted in fury in his office, his eyes burning with rage as he glared at his assistant. How did this get out? Who dares to defy me? The assistant bowed his head in fear, muttering, "Sir, no one knows who's behind this, but they say he's invisible like a ghost. We can't trace him." Meanwhile, Logan Hastings continued to fall into a state of extreme tension. He always felt like someone was watching him, an unknown shadow he couldn't pinpoint. His phone continually received strange messages, images documenting every wrong he thought he had buried. One afternoon, as he stood outside the school gym, he received a strange message from an unknown number. It was short, but enough to send a chill down his spine. "I know everything you've done, Logan, and I'm coming for you." Logan shuddered, looking around in panic. He felt a cold gaze piercing into his back. The absolute confidence he once had was now replaced with the persistent fear, haunting him at every turn. "This can't be happening, it can't be," Logan muttered, trying to calm himself. But the more he denied it, the more he realized the terrifying truth that the hunter who had once stalked others was now the prey. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the Reaper continued his perfectly executed plan of retaliation. John Mitchell sat quietly in an old car, hidden in the shadows, his eyes glued to the laptop screen. The covert videos he had collected of Logan and his friends bullying and assaulting Aaliyah, along with other students, were carefully edited, packaged, and prepared to be sent at the perfect moment. Sitting beside him, his old friend Marcus Reed watched intently, his voice lowering with concern. "John, are you sure this is the best way? The Hastings family is still very powerful. They won't give up easily." The Reaper turned to look at Reed, his eyes sharp as steel. "Marcus, in war, the best way to defeat an enemy is to make them destroy themselves from within. Just a little pressure, and people like the Hastings will expose their weaknesses and cowardice. And when that happens, everything will collapse." With that, he pressed the send button. In that instant, all of Logan's misdeeds were sent out, rapidly spreading across social media and to the email inboxes of teachers and parents. Within minutes, every student at Westfield Academy witnessed the truth behind Logan Hastings' charming, powerful exterior. The next day, the atmosphere at the school had completely shifted. The looks of contempt, the whispers of criticism, all began to target Logan. He panicked when he realized he was becoming the target of isolation, fear, and hatred, just like what he had done to Aaliyah. That evening, in the massive mansion now filled with unease, Logan stood trembling in front of his father. Thomas Hastings, his face marked with exhaustion and tension, yelled in fury, "What have you done, Logan? How could you be foolish enough to let all of this get out?" Logan screamed in desperation, "Father, I don't know who did this. Someone's watching me. I can't control it." Thomas Hastings suddenly fell silent, and then it hit him. The thing he had feared for so long was now coming true. The man who had once terrified the entire military world was here, in his very town, determined to destroy everything he had built. Looking directly into Logan's eyes, Thomas Hastings spoke coldly, filled with fear. "The person doing this isn't just anyone. It's the Reaper, and he won't stop until our family is completely destroyed." Outside the window, in the quiet night, John Mitchell stood there, his eyes steely and resolute. He knew his battle had only just begun, but he also understood well that now the Hastings family was truly panicking and losing control. And in that moment, as Aaliyah sat with her mother, She felt for the first time in months a warmth of hope swelling inside her. Her father had returned, and when he appeared, justice would always be served, no matter what it took. The following days, Logan's mind grew increasingly unstable. He no longer felt safe in the town his father had once ruled. The sneers, the whispered gossip from friends and acquaintances, kept his anger boiling. In his desperation, Logan decided to take matters into his own hands. Once again, he would prove that the power of the Hastings family wouldn't easily crumble. Late in the afternoon, as the sky darkened into a deep gray, Aaliyah walked alone down the familiar, deserted street leading home. She walked slowly, her mind heavy with thoughts of everything that had just happened. But today, something felt different. The air around her was unusually tense. As Aaliyah passed a dimly lit corner, figures suddenly appeared, blocking her path. Her heart raced as she recognized Logan Hastings and his friends, Ethan and Trey, standing before her, their eyes filled with hostility. "Hello, Aaliyah," Logan said coldly, his voice laced with challenge. "Do you really think that your father, that old ghost, can protect you? Let's see if he shows up in time today." Aaliyah tried to remain calm, though deep down she felt an overwhelming sense of unease. "Logan, you've gone too far. Stop now, before it's too late." Logan sneered and took slow steps toward her. "Too late? You don't get it, do you? This is just the beginning. You and your little family will pay the price for daring to stand against me." At that moment, Ethan and Trey lunged at her, grabbing her roughly. Aaliyah struggled, but their strength was too much for her to break free. Logan smirked, stepping closer, his eyes flashing with cruel intent. "Let's see if your father dares to come back to this town after seeing what happens to his precious daughter." But just as Logan was about to strike the first blow, a cold voice rang out from behind them, sharp as a blade. "Logan Hastings, it's time for you to understand what it feels like to be hunted." They all turned abruptly, their hearts pounding as they saw a tall figure standing motionless in the darkness, eyes cold and haunting. John Mitchell, the Reaper, had appeared like a ghost, just as Logan had feared. Logan hesitated for a moment but quickly tried to regain his false confidence, sneering, "Old man, what do you think you can do here? We outnumber you." The Reaper took slow, steady steps toward them, showing no fear or hesitation. "In war, numbers don't matter as much as skill. And I warn you, I'm very good at neutralizing those who threaten my daughter." Before Logan could respond, the Reaper moved with lightning speed, rushing toward Ethan and Trey. In just a few quick, precise movements, he knocked them both to the ground, leaving them writhing in pain, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Logan panicked and stumbled back, but John Mitchell's cold, steely eyes were fixed on him. The man who the entire U.S. military had once feared, the Reaper, now stood before him, and Logan realized that he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Don't come any closer," Logan screamed, trying desperately to hold on to his last shred of authority. But his voice was hollow, devoid of strength. The Reaper stopped just a few steps away from Logan, his gaze cold and commanding. "I won't strike harder, this time at least. But this is your final warning. If the Hastings son dares to touch Aaliyah again, the consequences won't just stop at a few minor wounds like today." Logan turned pale, his legs weak, and he collapsed to the ground, his eyes filled with fear and helplessness as he watched the man coldly turn away and gently lift his daughter to her feet. Aaliyah, overwhelmed, hugged her father tightly, feeling for the first time the absolute protection from a man she had always longed to know. John Mitchell gently patted her shoulder, his voice soft yet firm. "Sweetheart, I'm here now. No one will hurt you again." On the way home, in the warm silence, Aaliyah looked at her father with gratitude in her eyes, whispering, "Dad, I don't know how to thank you enough." Mitchell smiled faintly, his gaze softening just a little. "Sweetheart, protecting you is my duty. But this war isn't over yet. The Hastings family won't give up easily. We need to be ready." Behind them, on the dark road, Logan lay there, trembling in panic. For the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be hunted, the feeling of being a prey with no way out. And he understood clearly that the power his family once boasted about was no longer untouchable. Because when the Reaper returned, everything changed, forever and irreversibly. That night, while the town of Westfield lay in peaceful slumber, social media suddenly erupted with a barrage of evidence and confidential information about the brutal truth that the Hastings family had been trying to conceal for years. Photos, videos documenting illegal transactions, bribery, and even the violent actions of Logan and his friends were gradually exposed to the public. Within just a few hours, the entire town of Westfield woke to an unprecedented shock and outrage. Every eye was drawn to the sprawling mansion of Mayor Thomas Hastings, the man once considered untouchable. But now, his power and prestige began to crumble piece by piece, like a sandcastle breaking apart before the rising tide. Inside his cold and lavish office, Thomas Hastings sat before his computer screen, his face pale and trembling. News alerts continued to pop up, forcing him to face the terrifying reality that everything he had built was disintegrating rapidly. His assistant rushed in, voice filled with fear. "Sir, the press and townspeople are gathered outside the mansion. They want an explanation." Hastings jumped up, losing control, and threw a glass cup to the ground. "An explanation? What can I say when the whole world knows our secrets? Prepare the car. We need to leave immediately." In a panic, Thomas Hastings quickly gathered important documents and rushed out of the house through the secret passage in the back. He hoped to escape the town before being caught. But what Hastings didn't know was that from the shadows, one man had been watching his every move. John Mitchell, the Reaper. On the quiet road leading out of town, Hastings' luxury car sped through the night, the headlights cutting through the dark as if trying to escape something invisible, tailing closely behind. But as Hastings approached a dark bend, another car suddenly pulled out, blocking his path. Hastings slammed on the brakes, his heart pounding as he saw the figure of a tall man stepping out of the car in front. The Reaper appeared right before him, like a ghost waiting in the night. Thomas Hastings turned pale, trying to remain calm, but his voice shook when he spoke. "Mr. Mitchell, you're making a grave mistake. You have no idea who you're dealing with." The Reaper stepped forward, his cold eyes piercing into the panicked man. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A corrupt man, abusing power, enabling his son to torture the innocent. Now, you must pay for everything you've done." Hastings stepped back, stammering in desperation. "Please, I can give you anything you want. Money, power, anything. Just let me go." Mitchell merely sneered, stepping even closer, his voice filled with contempt and finality. "You have nothing I want, Thomas. The only thing I need is justice. And now, justice is coming for you." Just as Mitchell moved closer, the sound of police car lights flashing behind them broke the silence of the night, the sirens echoing in the distance. Thomas Hastings trembled, realizing there was no escape left. The Reaper had set everything up perfectly, ensuring he couldn't flee from the law. In the next few seconds, the police arrived, officers quickly surrounding the scene. Thomas Hastings stood frozen as his hands were cuffed in the blinding light of the headlights. The Reaper stepped back, his gaze cold yet satisfied as he watched the moment when the power and arrogance of the Hastings family crumbled completely. One officer approached Mitchell, nodding in appreciation and speaking softly, "Thank you, sir. We've been waiting for this opportunity for years." Mitchell merely nodded lightly, then quietly slipped back into the shadows as he always did. In an instant, the man disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only the echo of a legend that the whole town now feared and revered. The next morning, news of Thomas Hastings' arrest spread through Westfield like a tidal wave. People flooded the streets, relief and joy evident on their faces. Finally, the underground power that had controlled the town for so many years had been overthrown. In their small room, Aaliyah sat beside her mother, her eyes shining with endless pride and happiness as she watched the images on the morning news. Monica hugged her daughter tightly, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your father kept his promise. He came back and protected us." Aaliyah smiled softly, her gaze turning toward the window, where the morning sunlight began to shine brightly, banishing the darkness that had once overshadowed her life. Now, she understood that even if her father had to leave again, this time, he had left behind a powerful legacy. A legacy of courage and justice that no one in this town could ever forget. Because when the Reaper appeared, everyone knew that darkness would have to give way to light. And this time, the light of justice would never go out again. That night, after the power of his father completely crumbled, Logan Hastings sank deep into despair. He had no friends, no supporters. Everything he once owned, all the power he once boasted of, had vanished in the blink of an eye. In the now cold and empty mansion, Logan huddled in the corner of the room, his mind spinning with rage and hopelessness. The sneers, the whispers of criticism from every direction, felt like invisible knives slicing into his already fragile ego. Unable to bear the humiliation any longer, Logan decided to execute one final plan. A direct assault on the Mitchell family, the ones who had destroyed his life. The night fell dark over Westfield, a chilling fog spreading over the empty streets. In that darkness, Logan drove quickly through narrow roads, heading straight for the small house where he knew John Mitchell was living with Aaliyah and Monica. Inside the luxury car, now filled with hatred and a thirst for revenge, Logan gripped the knife tightly, his mind completely out of control. "I won't let you get away with this," Logan muttered to himself, his eyes wild with madness. "If I can't have anything, neither should you." The car stopped a few dozen meters from the Mitchell house. Logan silently stepped out of the vehicle, blending into the darkness with every heavy step full of hatred. But what he didn't know was that the Reaper had always been ready for this. John Mitchell had long predicted this final, reckless action of Logan's. Inside the small house, all the lights were off, creating the illusion that the Mitchell family was sound asleep. Logan moved closer to the window, cautiously looking around before attempting to break in. But just as he stepped into the living room, a cold voice rang out behind him. "You didn't think I was waiting for you, did you, Logan?" Logan spun around, his heart stopping as he saw the Reaper standing tall in the darkness, his cold, piercing eyes as if they could see straight into his soul. Mitchell had been there all along, calm and imposing, like a ghost from the past that Logan couldn't escape. You think you're so great?" Logan shouted madly, raising the knife in his hand. "You took everything from me." Mitchell took slow, steady steps, keeping just enough distance for Logan to feel the invisible pressure bearing down on him. "Everything you lost, you brought on yourself. I only brought the truth to light." Logan screamed, lunging in a frenzy to attack. But Mitchell, with years of combat experience, easily dodged the strike calmly and decisively. The battle between the two raged fiercely, each of Logan's moves desperate, each of Mitchell's counterattacks precise and cold. In the darkness, Logan threw everything he had in frantic attacks, but Mitchell was always a step ahead. With each perfect blow, Mitchell pushed Logan into helplessness, forcing him to face the harsh truth: he couldn't win against the Reaper. Finally, in a brief moment of vulnerability, Mitchell delivered a decisive blow that sent Logan crashing to the floor. The knife fell from his hand, clinking coldly. Logan lay motionless, gasping for breath, his eyes full of panic as he looked at the man before him. Why don't you just kill me now?" Mitchell crouched down, looking at Logan with a calm but firm voice. "I'm not a killer like you think. You need to live, to face justice, and understand that your mistakes and crimes will always have consequences." At that moment, the flashing lights of police cars lit up outside the window, their sirens echoing, shattering the stillness of the night. Mitchell stood up, coldly, stepping to open the door for the approaching officers. Logan desperately tried to struggle as the handcuffs were locked around his wrists, but it was in vain. He knew there would be no one to help him now. One of the officers turned to Mitchell, his face solemn but full of respect. "Mr. Mitchell, we're very grateful to you for resolving this without any further casualties." Mitchell merely nodded lightly, his eyes briefly meeting Logan's one last time, his voice full of authority but calm. "I hope you understand this, Logan. The cost of power and greed is very high. Live and remember this lesson." Logan was led away, his head turning back to look at the house one final time. For the first time in his life, he understood that everything he had lost was the direct result of his own actions. In his eyes now remained nothing but regret and despair. After Logan was taken away, Mitchell turned back to look at his daughter and wife, who were quietly standing in the corner of the room. Aaliyah rushed to embrace her father, her voice choking with emotion. "Dad, it's finally over." Mitchell smiled gently, softly stroking his daughter's hair. "Yes, sweetheart. But more importantly, justice has truly prevailed." That night, the town of Westfield finally fell into a peaceful sleep, marking the end of a dark era and ushering in a bright future filled with hope that no one would ever forget. In the days following that fateful night, the town of Westfield seemed to awaken to a completely different dawn. The morning sunlight filtered through the narrow streets, chasing away the lingering fog that had overshadowed life here for so many years. The people of Westfield stepped out of their homes with a sense of relief, as faith in justice and truth was once again restored. Just a few days after the shocking arrest, Mayor Thomas Hastings and his son Logan were officially confronted with serious charges before the law. On the front pages of newspapers and on television, images of them being escorted away in prison uniforms marked the complete collapse of the most powerful family in town. The forces that had once relied on the Hastings family to manipulate power, engage in corruption, and cover up crimes were now exposed to the public eye. Large-scale investigations were quickly launched, reaching into every corner of the local government and town council. None of them could hide their wrongdoings and secrets that had been carefully protected before. In the courtroom, Thomas Hastings stood with his head bowed, no longer the proud, arrogant man he once was. Each accusation from the prosecutor felt like a cold blade, methodically peeling away the dirty secrets he had once believed would remain buried in the dark. Logan, sitting beside his father, stared blankly, helplessly looking down at his trembling hands. For the first time in his life, He understood what it felt like to be the one who had caused pain to others. In the spectator seats, Aaliyah and Monica silently watched the trial. The young girl gripped her mother's hand, her eyes filled with trust and emotion. Not far from them, John Mitchell, the Reaper, observed everything with calm composure, his eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction yet firm resolve. After hearing the clear evidence and the helpless confessions from the defendants, the judge declared sternly and impartially, "Thomas Hastings, Logan Hastings, these defendants have abused their power, causing deep harm to the people of Westfield. Before the law, no one is above reproach. The court hereby finds the defendants guilty and will impose the harshest penalties according to justice." The gavel struck decisively, officially ending a dark chapter in the town's history. The people of Westfield rose to their feet, applauding, their emotions flooding the courtroom. With the collapse of the Hastings family, the town quickly began a period of powerful reform. A new government was established with upright, transparent individuals. Town council meetings became more open and public than ever, no longer allowing manipulation or abuse of power. Aaliyah was invited to speak at the community festival held in the town square, where she had once endured the scorn and derision of others. Standing before all the people of Westfield, the once small and overlooked girl now shone brightly with pride. "My family and I have suffered from injustice, but thanks to the courage and sacrifice of my father, John Mitchell, and the unity of everyone here, we have proven that justice always prevails, and the truth can never be hidden." Loud applause erupted from all sides, and the people of Westfield, for the first time, truly felt the power of community as they stood together to fight against injustice. The town, once engulfed in the darkness of power and corruption, was now embarking on a new journey, a journey toward fairness, transparency, and hope. Meanwhile, John Mitchell stood behind the stage, quietly watching his daughter with pride. Marcus Reed, his old friend from their military days, approached him, gently patting his shoulder with gratitude. "John, you really did the impossible. You didn't just save your family, you saved this town." Mitchell nodded gently, his eyes still fixed on Aaliyah. "Marcus, I'm only doing what any father would do. What matters most now is that this town has a new chance to rebuild, with no more darkness weighing over it." The ceremony ended with joy and hope spreading through every corner of Westfield. People walked down the streets, their hearts light as if they had just escaped a long nightmare. Children played and laughed in the square, a sight that had once been absent for too long in this town. In the Mitchell home, warmth filled the air. Monica prepared dinner. Aaliyah organized her textbooks, getting ready for the upcoming exams. Mitchell sat in the living room, silently looking out the window, enjoying the peace he had long forgotten. Aaliyah walked over and gently embraced her father from behind. "Dad, we're finally able to live in peace." Mitchell turned around and smiled softly, his eyes full of tenderness. "Yes, sweetheart. But what's more important is that today, justice has truly triumphed." The gentle sunset cast its golden light over Westfield, marking the end of a long day. A new chapter had truly begun, one where justice was no longer a distant dream, but the foundation for everything. Because from this day forward, everyone knew that, no matter how dark the night may be, light and truth would always prevail. After the painful yet proud events, the Mitchell family finally found the peace they once thought would never return. Westfield, now entering a new chapter, one of light, hope, and the unity of those who had endured so much suffering. Gradually, the psychological wounds of Monica and Aaliyah began to heal. In their small, warm home, the dinners became livelier than ever. Laughter, conversations, and forgotten memories now filled every corner of their household. Monica, after a long period of pressure, had rediscovered joy in her new job at the local hospital. She became an inspiring figure, helping and caring for those who had suffered just like she had. Seeing the smile return to her mother's face, Aaliyah felt as though her entire world was being rebuilt. Meanwhile, Aaliyah continued to dedicate herself to her studies. After everything she had gone through, the young girl understood more than ever the value of fighting for the truth and justice. At Westfield Academy, where she had once been a victim of bullying, Aaliyah had now become a symbol of courage and perseverance. Not only her peers but also teachers and school staff admired and respected her. The day of graduation finally came. In the solemn ceremony held in the school's grand hall, Aaliyah stepped up to the stage as the top student of her class. Before all the students, parents, and teachers, she confidently and emotionally shared, "The challenges we face don't define us. What truly matters is how we choose to stand up and face them. I once thought I had to fight alone, but now I realize that we always have strength from those who love and believe in us." The auditorium erupted in applause, with many unable to hide their emotions at Aaliyah's sincere and inspiring words. When the ceremony ended, the principal gave her some exciting news. She had earned a prestigious full scholarship to Harvard University, the school she had always dreamed of. Stepping off the stage, Aaliyah quickly ran to her parents, her face beaming with pure happiness. Monica hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face with pride and emotion. "My daughter, you did it. I'm so proud of you." John Mitchell stood beside them, his eyes quietly but full of love and pride for his daughter. The man who had once been a feared legend in the military now stood before everyone as a simple father, happy to see his daughter succeed. He gently placed his hand on Aaliyah's shoulder, his voice warm yet firm. "Sweetheart, today is the greatest day of my life. You've shown everyone that true strength comes from the heart, from courage, and from believing in the truth." After the graduation ceremony, the Mitchell family returned home, where the warmth of unity and comfort always prevailed. That evening, Marcus Reed stopped by, bringing with him cheerful stories from the old days, helping the Mitchell family grow even closer and happier. As night fell, in their small room, Aaliyah walked over to her father and gently asked, "Dad, what will you do next? Are you going anywhere?" Mitchell smiled softly, looking deep into his daughter's eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. No matter what, I want to be close to you, quietly protecting you and watching you grow." Aaliyah hugged her father tightly, feeling a deep sense of warmth and safety. She knew that, although the legendary man in front of her still maintained an air of mystery, his heart was always with his family, ready to stand by her side to protect her from any danger in the future. Westfield, under the light of a new day, was brighter and more vibrant than ever before. Those who had been hurt had now learned to forgive and move on. New seeds were growing in an environment of faith and hope. For Aaliyah Mitchell, life at Harvard would open a new chapter full of opportunities and exciting challenges. But she knew that, no matter where she went, her father would always quietly watch over her, like an invisible protector, ready to appear whenever she needed him. Standing before the gates of the prestigious university, Aaliyah took a deep breath, her eyes shining with confidence and determination. "I'm ready for the future." And in the distance, under the shade of a tree nearby, John Mitchell stood silently, watching his daughter step into a bright future she truly deserved. A faint smile passed over his lips, peaceful and content. The Reaper may forever remain a mysterious ghost in military history, but from now on, he was simply John Mitchell, a devoted father, always quietly standing behind his daughter, protecting her from the storms of life. Because he understood well that the most important victory in life was not the battles fought on the battlefield, but witnessing his daughter, a small girl who had endured so much suffering, grow strong and step into the future with unwavering belief in truth and justice. And that truly was the legacy the Reaper wanted to leave for this world. Thus, the dramatic and emotional journey of the Mitchell family came to an end, leaving behind a profound lesson about the strength of justice, courage, and family love. Through this story, we see clearly that no matter how powerful darkness and injustice may seem, in the end, light and truth always prevail. What do you think about the Reaper's actions in protecting his daughter from injustice? If you were him, would you have done the same? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories to come. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next videos.